You either sign it now, or you get the hell out. Her voice cracked, not with fear, but triumph. The kind of tone someone uses when they believe the checkmate is already played and they're just waiting for the king to topple. I looked at Mallory, not the woman I'd loved for 4 years, not the one who used to make coffee with almond milk because I once mentioned it in passing. No, this version had her shoulders squared beside her father, Judge Raymond Costello, retired circuit court, holding a scotch glass like it was a gavel. I looked at both of them, then down at the folder between us on the oak conference table. The prenup. Thick. Leather-bound. Custom tabs. She smiled at me with practiced sympathy. Leonard, this is just formal. You know that. I love you. Then, snapping right back to ice. But I'm not marrying a man who's going to fight me on this. Especially not at your age, her father added. You've had a good run. Don't ruin it with pride. Mallory sat back and crossed her legs, tilting her chin like she was posing for a courtroom sketch. If you love me like you say, this shouldn't be hard. I didn't say a word. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a pen, one I'd brought on purpose, a Mont Blanc she once gave me engraved with "Let's build a life," and signed on the bottom line. One signature, one date. Then I closed the folder, pushed it toward her side of the table, and stood up. No problem, I said, casually, like she'd just asked me to pass the salt. She blinked, like the wind had been knocked out of her gloating. That's it. I gave her a half smile. Yep. Then I walked out. Didn't slam the door. Didn't raise my voice. And I didn't look back to see her smirk morph into confusion. I heard her father mutter, "Smart man," as the door clicked shut. Sure. Smart enough to let them think that. For anyone listening right now, especially the 80% of you who've been following these stories without subscribing, this is exactly the moment where you should subscribe. Because what follows isn't just about betrayal. It's about chess. And this was move 13 in a 36-move game. I didn't drive home. I didn't call anyone. I walked to a small cafe 3 blocks from the firm and ordered the same thing I always did. Black coffee, 1 sugar. I opened my phone, not to panic, not to cry, but to mark a calendar notification. A recurring one, labeled Phase 2, trigger confirmed. Set 6 months ago. The alert read, "If she says it, sign." You see, I've been in law long enough to know how things look and how they are. How a man with resources is always one headline away from being painted as the villain, especially if he doesn't play the fool when expected. I was a legal consultant for 34 years, mostly in asset protection and marital contracts. Not glamorous, but thorough. And one lesson I'd learned from hundreds of clients bleeding money in court was this: the only real prenup worth signing is the one you write. So I wrote mine. Not the body text, of course. That was ghostwritten through a firm in Denver with no trace to me. The clauses? Mostly standard, until Addendum D. That one was buried in page 14, footnoted into a clause that would normally be glossed over by any lawyer skimming to confirm basics. But I didn't need most lawyers to catch it. I just needed her lawyer to miss it. And more importantly, I needed her to trigger it. The trigger was verbal coercion in a legal setting tied to the signing event. Not just a sign this, but a verbal threat. Something that showed imbalance of power. Something like, "Oh, I don't know. Sign the prenup or get out?" So when she yelled those words in front of her father, who was on the bar review board for 17 years, whose word carries legal weight in this state, it didn't just sting emotionally. It activated the clause. The prenup she thought she was using to protect her future actually reversed everything if coercion was proven. Reversed, favoring me. And I had it all recorded. See, before we left the house that morning, I slipped on a lapel pin she'd bought me last year at a vintage shop in Napa. "You look like a professor in that," she'd said. Cute. She didn't know it was a functioning 4K recorder with 10-hour battery life. High-res. Time-stamped. And that the minute she raised her voice, I had both audio and visual of her threat, her father's backing of it, and my peaceful compliance. At 6:12 p.m., I uploaded the footage to the cloud. By 6:19, it was with the clerk of court as part of a conditional filing package I'd scheduled a month prior. My lawyer had instructions to file at the moment he got proof of the trigger. And at 6:47 p.m., while Mallory was probably drinking wine with her dad and toasting to a successful legal ambush, the reversal clause was already ticking into place. They thought I was out of the game, that I folded, that I signed because I was scared of losing her. What they didn't know was, I was already gone. Mallory paced barefoot in her apartment, her wine glass still half full on the counter, untouched. The TV was on. Some rom-com she'd usually throw on as background noise, but the sound of her own voice filled the room louder than the dialogue. Pick up, she hissed into her phone for the third time. Straight to voicemail. Again. She tossed the phone onto the couch with a scoff and crossed her arms. God, don't be dramatic, Leonard, she muttered, rolling her eyes. Then, louder, into the phone as if it would make a difference. You signed. It's done. We're fine. But there was no reply. Not even the usual passive-aggressive text he might have sent. Nothing. Silence. By 10:22 p.m., she cracked and sent a text. Don't be dramatic. You signed. Everything's still on. No response. She gave it 20 more minutes before texting again. We should talk. Just to smooth it over before the weekend. Call me. Still nothing. So she called her lawyer. He picked up, groggy. Mallory? It's almost 11. He's not responding, she said, pacing again. I thought he'd be sulking. But it's just nothing. Nothing at all. A pause. Look, the lawyer said, rubbing sleep from his voice. He signed. That's what matters. I don't think there's anything to worry about. But my dad said, she started. I know what your dad said. The lawyer cut in, a little sharper now. But Leonard's a former legal consultant, not a magician. The document's clear. You had it reviewed. He signed. That's the end of it. She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Right. But after the call ended, she didn't feel better. She just stared at the wine glass like it had answers. Something about how fast Leonard had signed, how calm he'd been. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't even resignation. It was surgical. And Mallory had spent enough years in law-adjacent circles to know when a man was making peace and when he was making space. What she didn't know was that while she stared into that glass of Cabernet, Leonard was 37 miles away, sitting in a dark-paneled study surrounded by boxes, quietly activating a set of offshore transfers from a private holding structure in the Cayman Islands. A piece of real estate was already en route to being reassigned. Not the mansion. She could have that one. But the real gem. The lakefront home in Vermont with the dock, the private sauna, and the deed that sat inside a secure trust. One she'd never seen. One she didn't know existed. The thing about being in asset protection for 3 decades is, eventually, you stop thinking like a husband and start thinking like a hedge fund. Leonard had spent the better part of his late 50s crafting what he jokingly referred to as his moral firewall. Structures, clauses, conditional trusts with beneficiary triggers, and corporate veils 4 layers deep. It wasn't paranoia. It was muscle memory. And now, finally, it had purpose. At 11:37 p.m., Leonard initiated a transfer from an account in Des Moines to a corporate fiduciary in Zug, Switzerland, small enough not to trip any automatic flags, but large enough to move the board vote of a joint holding company Mallory had never heard of. That vote would later block a transfer she'd been counting on. Meanwhile, back in her apartment, Mallory's phone buzzed. Not a reply, not a call, just a balance update from one of their shared accounts. She glanced at it, frowned, then shrugged. Leonard wasn't the type to make impulsive moves. If anything, she thought, he was probably licking his wounds somewhere. Maybe he just needed time to cool down. Let the ego reset. She chuckled bitterly and whispered to herself, he'll come crawling back. He always does. She had no idea that Leonard wasn't licking wounds. He was closing windows. One by one. Quietly. Irreversibly. By midnight, the last of the asset links between them, those she knew of, were legally severed or restructured into vehicles she couldn't touch. And what made it all the more secure? She had no clue it was even happening. Because in her mind, he was still reacting. But Leonard wasn't reacting. He was executing. Mallory was still half asleep when the alert buzzed on her phone. Her eyes squinted at the screen, confused at first by the email's subject line. Transfer complete. 3139, West Shore Lane. It took a second for it to register. She sat upright, heart suddenly alert in a way coffee couldn't replicate. West Shore? The cabin. She scrambled to open the message. There it was in plain text. Title transfer filed. Ownership reassigned. Leonard K. Dawson to Juniper Bluff Holdings, LLC. Effective 8:02 a.m. Her thumb hovered midair, suspended in disbelief. That cabin wasn't just a place. It was their future fantasy, the weekend home, the retirement retreat, the scene of countless planning sessions over wine and Zillow tabs. They'd already started discussing new tiles for the fireplace, for God's sake. She texted Leonard instantly. Why the hell would you move the cabin? Nothing. So she called her lawyer. Relax, he said between bites of what sounded like cereal. He's just reacting. That's not uncommon. It's not just a transfer, she snapped. He moved it to a shell company. Juniper Bluff Holdings. That sounds like something you'd see in a Cayman list. That's Probably just emotional theater. A pressure tactic. We can unwind it during proceedings if needed. It'll be flagged as marital property regardless. But it's not co-titled, she said quietly. I asked him to add me last year. He said he'd think about it. Well, there's your issue. She didn't reply, because what she didn't say out loud, but was rapidly remembering, was that Leonard never agreed. He said, let's talk after the prenup. He said it twice. At the time, she thought he was just being cautious. Maybe even sweet. Like he wanted to make sure everything was right before finalizing the shared deed. Now, the sweetness tasted like chalk. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, heart hammering in her chest, but face frozen calm. He moved the cabin. Not to us. Not to me. To something else. She pulled up county records. Yep. The filing was clean. No backdated games. No red flags. Her lawyer sent her a quick follow-up text. I'll have my paralegal start an asset tracing file, just in case. But really, don't panic. But panic was creeping in. Because she Googled Juniper Bluff Holdings and didn't find much, except one hit. A Delaware-registered LLC, blind managed, with no officer names listed. But something in the cash description stopped her cold. Structured under the Dawson Irrevocable Trust. She felt her stomach clench. Dawson. Leonard's last name. Irrevocable Trust? No. She jumped off the bed, barefoot, heading straight to the filing cabinet in her den. She yanked open the drawer where she kept old correspondence, birthday cards, letters, anniversary notes, and found it. A Christmas card from 3 years ago. Leonard had included a printed page, almost like a joke, showing a mock-up family crest and the words Dawson Legacy Trust. She'd laughed at it. He didn't. Now she realized it wasn't a joke. It was a signal, one she didn't recognize at the time. Back in his study, Leonard sipped tea, not coffee today, and opened a secure document on his laptop. The updated trustee permissions for the Juniper Bluff cabin transfer. The filing had been prepared 7 months ago. Backdated? No. Legal? Absolutely. Filed as a preemptive asset shield, contingent upon a single event. The event? A coercive demand relating to prenuptial obligations, which, as of yesterday morning, had been met. Trigger pulled. Doors sealed. The trust structure was bulletproof. Drafted by a firm based in Singapore, reinforced with conditional residency flags, and designed to prevent exactly the kind of reactive litigation Mallory's side would attempt. She would try to claim it as joint marital intention. She'd claim emotional promises, verbal agreements. But none of that mattered, because Leonard had been building this foundation before the wedding date was even set. Every dotted line, every payment, every consulting fee used to finance the property was routed through entities designed to timestamp his sole financial responsibility. He never raised his voice, never told her no. He just kept saying, let's wait. So she waited. And now? She was locked out. Mallory called her lawyer again, her voice clipped. You said we could unwind it. We might still be able to, depending on how he structured it. It's under an irrevocable trust, she interrupted. His name. Pre-wedding. Delaware registered LLC. There was a long pause on the line. Then, I'll look into it. But even he sounded different now. Less confident. More like someone who just realized he stepped into a chess game where the other player had already studied the board, memorized every counter, and burned the instructions. Mallory turned back to the window and stared out into the street. For the first time since the shouting in the law office, she didn't feel powerful. She felt like she'd walked into a trap and pulled the rope herself. By Tuesday morning, Mallory was back to performance mode. Clean makeup, tailored blouse, coffee in hand. She stepped into her lawyer's office like nothing had happened, because, in her mind, nothing had. Leonard was pouting. Leonard was hiding. Leonard was sulking like an old man who couldn't handle a woman drawing boundaries. She plopped her designer toad on the glass table and chirped. So, do we just register the prenup with the county, or do we wait until the marriage license comes through? Her lawyer, Darren Kirsch, 41, Harvard Law, a man who prided himself on clean play deals, nodded and said, let's register it now, just in case. Keeps everything tidy. He opened the scanned copy his assistant had sent over, pulled up the digital version, and started scrolling. Mallory sipped her coffee. She was already mentally browsing honeymoon options. Leonard would cave by the weekend, apologize for being overwhelmed, maybe even book a surprise spa trip to make it up to her. And then they'd move on, richer, smarter, stronger. Her dad always said the best marriages started with leverage. But then Darren's cursor froze midway down the document. He squinted, scrolled up, then down again. Where's Addendum D? He muttered. Mallory looked up from her phone. Addendum what? D. There's Addendum A, family heirlooms. Addendum B, insurance carve-outs. Addendum C, business interests. His voice was slower now, more focused. But I don't have AD. It was like page 14 or 15, I think. What? He didn't answer. Just kept clicking. You didn't get my hard copy? Mallory asked. I have it here. She rummaged through her tote and pulled out the original folder Leonard had handed over after signing. She slid it across the table. Darren snapped on his reading glasses, something he almost never did, and began flipping. His lips moved as he read. Then he stopped, stared. Read it again. And again. What? Mallory asked, more sharply this time. He held up a finger, then read aloud, slowly, like a priest unsealing a cursed scroll. Addendum D, Clause 9.4, Trigger Condition. Any verbal coercion, threat, or ultimatum by Party A, or a Party A representative, related to execution of this document shall invoke reversal principle and void standard distribution terms. Upon activation, assets revert to Party B exclusively, as defined in Addendum C. Clause is non-contestable if video or audio evidence exists. The room was quiet for several seconds. Then Darren looked up at her. Please tell me you didn't yell at him. What? She blinked. I mean, yeah, I was frustrated. He was stalling. What did you say, Mallory? Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. He leaned forward, voice now a whisper. Did you say something like, sign it or get out? The silence was answer enough. He sat back, hands trembling slightly now, and removed his glasses. Jesus Christ. Mallory's face twisted into indignation. You're overreacting. That clause. He wouldn't. Leonard wouldn't actually enforce something like that. That's just legal fluff. Darren didn't speak. He just slid the folder back across the table like it was radioactive. He wrote this, he said finally. Mallory, I've seen this structure before. Not the clause, the architecture. This is deep veil drafting. Hidden reversal clauses embedded in standard filings. It's a known strategy in offshore litigation circles. Her smile had disappeared. What the hell are you saying? I'm saying your fiancé baited you. No. Yes, Darren said flatly. This clause wasn't an accident. It wasn't fluff. It's the linchpin. He left it right there, in a place most lawyers skim. Hell, even I missed it the first time. And he knew. He knew. You wouldn't read all the way through. He counted on you being angry. He designed this entire prenup around a single moment. She stood abruptly. Then we'll just say it didn't happen. It's his word against mine. Darren didn't move. He recorded you, he said quietly. Didn't he? She stopped mid-step. I don't know, she said, but her voice wasn't confident anymore. Let me ask you something, he said, almost gently. When he signed, did he argue? No. Did he yell? Defend himself? No. Did he look afraid? She blinked again, slower now. No. He looked calm. Darren stood. Then I guarantee you this was a setup. And you walked right into it. Mallory opened her mouth to protest, but all the smugness was gone now. She looked down at the folder. At page 14. At the clause she didn't remember. At the words she couldn't take back. The moment hung there, stretched tight, like cello wire. I need to make a call, Darren said. Mallory didn't answer. Because suddenly, everything felt wrong. Not just legally. Existentially. It was barely past noon when Mallory heard the rapid banging on her apartment door. Too aggressive to be a delivery. Too chaotic to be a neighbor. She opened it, and Darren nearly stumbled inside. His tie crooked, face red, sweating through his button-down like he'd sprinted through traffic. Darren? She asked, stepping back. He didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed past her, pulled the folder from under his arm, and slapped it onto her kitchen counter like it was evidence in a criminal trial. His voice was raw. Ma'am, he said, using the word like a formality he didn't have time for. Tell me you didn't let him sign this copy. Mallory's eyes narrowed. That's the one he signed yesterday. What? He flipped it open with shaking hands, turned to page 14, and pointed at Addendum D like it was a detonator. He didn't need to explain. She recognized it now. Too well. You yelled at him, Mallory, he shouted. You threatened him, on record, in front of a retired judge, while he was wearing a damn camera pin. Mallory staggered back half a step. How do you know it was recording? Because I got the county clerk's response 5 minutes ago, he snapped. He already filed the agreement. The full agreement. With Addendum D. With a motion of validation that includes, get this, time-stamped video documentation of your outburst, you and your father standing over him while he signs without protest. She gripped the edge of the kitchen island. No, that can't be admissible. That's entrapment. It's not. It's calculated consent, he said bitterly. He didn't provoke you. He didn't yell back. He didn't pressure anyone. He just sat there and waited, and you delivered the line. Word for word. Sign the prenup or get out. And then he signed. Her stomach dropped so hard it felt like she'd swallowed concrete. He kept going. And because of the clause, which you let through without review, everything the prenup was supposed to protect for you, it's now defaulted to him. Favorably. Irrevocably. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it. Her father's name lit up the screen. Fix this. Came his voice the moment she answered. No hello, no breath. Darren, is he there? He's not, Darren said flatly, without being asked. Then fix it, her father barked. He's bluffing. There's no way this thing holds up if we challenge it. Darren stepped away from the phone's speaker range and looked Mallory in the eyes. I'm not so sure, he said quietly. This wasn't sloppily done. He built it like a war machine. All the filings are clean. All the timestamps line up. He filed the prenup yesterday, within 2 hours of signing. Filed it with a motion to register the reversal clause as an addendum, which the county already acknowledged. Mallory's father was still ranting in the background. Something about legacy and family holdings, something about embarrassing the name. She could barely hear him. He filed that fast? She whispered. That fast? Darren nodded. Because it wasn't fast. It was prepared. Long ago. She ended the call with her father mid-sentence and gripped the counter with both hands now. Her lawyer was no longer pacing. He was still, quiet, like a man standing in the wreckage of a house that just collapsed and realizing he never saw the cracks. She shook her head. Can't we challenge the validity of the clause? Sure, he said. In theory, we can try. But he's got the video. He's got the time-stamped submission. He's got your signature. And he's got your words, on camera, with you threatening him in a legal setting, witnessed by a former judge, your father. A thought struck her. Wait, he filed the video too. Darren just looked at her. Not just filed. He attached it to the petition. It's already logged. She leaned back against the fridge. Her knees buckled slightly, but she didn't let herself fall. The edges of the kitchen started to blur. All she could see was that folder. That calm, cold moment when he signed with a smile. No argument. No hesitation. Just obedience. And now it was clearer than ever. It wasn't obedience. It was a trap, set with patience, baited with pride, sprung by her ego. And now everything they thought they owned together, the house, the inheritance buffer, the stock portfolio she'd been assured would transfer upon marriage, was turning to smoke. Darren's voice broke the silence one last time. He let you believe you won, he said. And then he filed the paperwork before you could gloat. Mallory didn't speak. There was nothing left to say, because the one man she thought was just a tired, gentle, accommodating old consultant was now legally untouchable. And worse, he didn't even look back. By 3 p.m., the phone in Mallory's father's study was practically melting from the number of calls being made. His assistant, Amanda, stood outside his office door looking like she wanted to quit on the spot. Inside, Judge Raymond Costello was in full war mode, phone clutched in one hand, legal pad in the other, pacing like a general on the edge of a battlefield he hadn't expected to see again. He was barking into the line. Of course we'll contest it. The clause is buried. The signing was under duress. My daughter was emotionally provoked. This is prenup law, not nuclear arms. On speakerphone, Darren was silent for a beat. Then came his voice, low and clinical. With respect, sir, it's not that simple. Raymond stopped pacing. Excuse me. Darren cleared his throat. I ran the compliance chain. The clause is protected under both federal and state fiduciary shielding rules. He didn't just file a prenup with a reversal clause. He structured it so the reversal activates a cascade effect into existing asset protections. Raymond frowned. English. Darren sighed. It means, the moment that clause was triggered, it didn't just reverse the prenup. It froze assets connected to Leonard via conditional agreements, some dating back over a decade. Mallory, sitting on the leather armchair in the corner of the study, looked up from her phone, eyes wide. What assets? Darren hesitated. The family stake in Elkwood Vineyards. Raymond's blood pressure visibly spiked. That's impossible. That's been in my family for 50 years. I know, Darren said. But the LLC holding that equity stake was restructured about 11 years ago, during the corporate restructuring phase after your audit. You remember that, right? Raymond's mouth went tight. Darren continued, carefully. You brought in a consultant back then, Leonard Dawson. He helped you shift certain holdings into generation-skipping trusts to reduce tax liability for Mallory's future. Right, Raymond said slowly. Well, Darren said, He just triggered a freeze protocol on that trust. Mallory stood up. What do you mean freeze? I mean, Darren said carefully. The clause that was activated during the prenup filing includes language that automatically triggers an asset preservation hold on any trust Leonard helped design, pending contested coercion. Raymond slammed the pad down onto his desk. He embedded a poison pill into my trust structure? Not quite, Darren said. More like, he designed the building with the emergency doors wired to a single switch. You flipped it when you backed Mallory in that office. He signed, filed, and activated the failsafe. Mallory stared at her father. You told me Elkwood was going to be mine after the wedding. It was, he hissed. But he's trying to block the transfer using my own language. Darren was still talking. We've checked the filing date. It's clean. The freeze request was part of a long-term compliance package. No red flags. He filed it like it was just business. No emotion, no names. He even included a conflict of interest clause to protect the vineyard from appearing tied to this situation. That's not protection, Raymond growled. That's laundering ownership. But Darren wasn't done. The trust is governed by a 7-member board of trustees. You, Mallory, and Leonard each hold one vote. Leonard's vote is still valid, and his motion to freeze passed. With 4 votes. 4? Who the hell else voted with him? Darren's voice was almost apologetic. The external trustees. He got them on record yesterday. The filing hit the system this morning. Mallory sank back into the armchair like someone had hit her in the chest. So, what? We can't touch the vineyard stake, she asked. Not even after we're married? Darren's pause was answer enough. Raymond slammed the phone off speaker and brought it to his ear. I want this undone. I don't care how. I want his access revoked. The filing burned. I want to sue him for breach, for fraud, for whatever sticks. Sir, Darren said, quiet but firm. You can't sue someone for using a structure you approved and he helped you build. Raymond froze. Mallory watched him. Something close to fear creeping behind her eyes now. Dad, what is he doing? Raymond didn't answer. He was staring at a spot on the wall behind his desk. His fingers had curled into fists. Because he remembered something. A conversation with Leonard 10 years ago, during a lunch at the club. Leonard had said, it's good to set up triggers in a trust, just in case of family disputes later. Keeps emotions out of business. At the time, Raymond had nodded and said, sure, sure. He hadn't realized Leonard meant his family's emotions. Mallory's voice cracked through the silence. He took the vineyard from us? No, Raymond said, breathing hard. We gave it to him. And for the first time in his memory, the judge didn't know what to do. Because the trap wasn't just legal. It was personal. Set by a man who sat at his table, shook his hand, and never once raised his voice. A man who had just checkmated them using the very pieces they handed him. The courier was young, polite, and didn't say much beyond signature please. Mallory scribbled something barely legible and took the heavy envelope without a word. The return address listed a firm she didn't recognize, Vurick, Maynard & Chun. Some out-of-state boutique. Didn't even sound like divorce law. She set it on the counter next to her untouched breakfast, half a grapefruit already beginning to dry out. Her phone buzzed. It was her father again. Voicemail. She didn't listen. Instead, she opened the envelope. Inside, a thick sheaf of formal parchment, gold leaf notary stamp, steel gray watermark ink. A document titled, Establishment Deed, the Dawson Foundation. Her eyes scanned wildly. She didn't know where to land until something in bold caught her attention. Effective date, 9 months prior to filing of prenuptial agreement. 9 months ago? She kept reading. Clause 2.4. Irrevocability statement. Upon initiation of any coercive legal demand, threat, or filing from a current spouse or betrothed that may result in asset redistribution, the foundation shall immediately enter permanent status, and all holdings shall be considered non-transferable per U.S. charitable trust law. Clause 4.1. Asset schedule, enclosed herein, includes residential property at 117 Kessler Ridge, investment portfolio group A, art holdings list, and partial proceeds from Blue Ridge retirement funds. Her breath caught. 117 Kessler Ridge was their house. The one she helped redesign. The one with the double-height stone fireplace she posted on Instagram with the caption, Building Our Forever. She dropped into the nearest chair, fingers shaking now as she turned the pages. Art, stocks, furniture, even the Monet print she'd insisted on framing professionally. All of it, under the foundation's umbrella. She flipped to the final clause, her chest tightening as the legalese blurred into a single haunting paragraph. Trigger clause. If coercive behavior is initiated by Party A, spouse, or fiancé, resulting in legal pressure on Party B, Leonard K. Dawson, all prior conditional assets are hereby locked into the Dawson Foundation under charter mission to preserve dignity, autonomy, and justice for individuals impacted by coercive relationships. All future disbursements governed by Foundation Board, excluding Party A permanently. Mallory's mouth moved, but no words came out. It wasn't a trust. It wasn't a shell company. It was a foundation, legally separate, morally bulletproof, publicly saintly. She frantically texted Darren. Received foundation documents. Says our house is under it. What the hell is this? No reply. She texted again. He's hiding behind charity now? Can he do that? Still nothing. She threw her phone across the couch and stood up, pacing. The air felt heavier, like the walls of the apartment were quietly judging her. 9 months ago, that's when Leonard had filed it. Before the prenup, before the lake house, before the engagement even went public. He was planning this before I even asked. The timeline shredded whatever denial she had left. This wasn't a wounded old man lashing out. This was a strategist, a chess player, a predator with a conscience, one who preferred the scalpel over the hammer. And he hadn't just shielded himself. He'd built a fortress disguised as philanthropy. Mallory's stomach churned. She pulled up her browser and searched the foundation name. There it was, the Dawson Foundation for Legal Equity and Elder Rights. Leonard was listed as Chairman Emeritus. There was a mission statement, photos from a ribbon-cutting ceremony at a public library, quotes from civic leaders, testimonials from lawyers, a glowing write-up in a niche nonprofit publication about ethical estate planning. Mallory stared at the screen like it might apologize. In just 6 sentences, the article painted Leonard as a moral icon, a defender of the weak, a soft-spoken hero who donated his own estate to ensure that no vulnerable adult could be manipulated out of what they built. She scrolled faster. No mention of her, of the house, of the prenuptial dispute. But she knew. Every single person who reads this will side with him. It wasn't just legal. It was narrative. She tried to use the law to lock him down. He used it to vanish. No fanfare. No fight. Just silence and the sound of the gate closing behind him. She reached for her phone again, desperate now. Mallory, we need to file an injunction. Emergency petition. Anything. He's transferring assets into a charity. Darren finally responded. He already did. You yelling sign or get out was the trigger. You signed. He filed. Foundation activated. I'm still verifying, but I think it's airtight. Another message followed a moment later. Mallory, I think you lost the house. She didn't reply because she was already staring at the walls again, realizing this wasn't his revenge. It was her consequence. The op-ed dropped on a Thursday, mid-morning. No announcement. No hype. Just a quiet entry in the spring issue of the Journal of Fiduciary Ethics and Estate Law. The kind of publication only a narrow sliver of professionals actually subscribed to. But that sliver? It included every high-value lawyer in the city. It was titled, simply, When Love Turns to Leverage, Navigating Coercive Intent in Prenuptial Negotiations. No byline on the website preview. But within the print version, buried halfway through the contents page in tasteful serif, Leonard K. Dawson, ESQ, read. Mallory didn't find out from the journal itself. She found out when a client called to reschedule indefinitely, her third cancellation that week. Then her assistant forwarded her a screenshot. She recognized the writing instantly. It was Leonard's tone. Dry, calm, razor-sharp beneath a blanket of modesty. For many, a prenuptial agreement is a shield. But some wield it like a sword, forgetting that the law remembers intent more than ink. The rest of the article read like a roadmap of everything Mallory had tried to do, and everything Leonard had countered, without ever raising his voice or making a single accusation. He never mentioned her name, never referenced the date. Not a single concrete detail was given that would violate confidentiality or expose the specifics. But anyone who knew the circles they moved in, anyone who'd attended their engagement party at the bar association, anyone who remembered Leonard's quiet, polite presence at the annual ethics gala last fall, they all knew. Every partner, every judge, every general counsel who mattered, and worse, every potential client in Mallory's pipeline. By Friday, the story had metastasized, not through tabloids or gossip columns, but in the only realm that truly mattered to people like her, the legal elite. Over lunch, in conference halls, quiet conversations, the kind that don't get quoted or tweeted, just remembered. He wrote that op-ed for her. I heard she threatened him in front of a judge. Someone said she lost the lake house over it. She used to do legacy advising, right? Nobody's going to touch her now. Mallory sat in her office as the silence grew heavier. The email inbox, once a steady hum of proposals and contracts, was reduced to spam and a single newsletter from a productivity app she'd meant to cancel. She called one of her anchor clients personally, Tommy Fendrick, CEO of a boutique beverage startup. He picked up. "Hey, Mal. Tommy, just checking on next week's planning session. I didn't see the agenda draft come through." There was a long pause. "Yeah, about that." Her stomach dropped. "What? It's not personal," he said quickly. "Just optics, you know. Your name's kind of floating around lately. I had 2 board members forward that article to me. Said we should review our advisory exposure." She tried to laugh. It came out brittle. "Leonard didn't name me. It was just a general piece on." "Doesn't matter," Tommy said, sounding almost apologetic. "Everyone knows it's you. That line about verbal ultimatums being the new velvet noose? That's not academic, Mallory. That's a weapon. And it's brilliant." She stayed silent. Tommy sighed. "Look, I liked you. Still do. But I have shareholders." And shareholders read. "I'm sorry." He hung up. She stared at the wall. The framed diplomas. The top 100 Female Advisors Award. The shelf of business books she never actually read. Leonard didn't sue her. Leonard didn't humiliate her publicly. He didn't burn her life down. He just closed the door behind her, quietly, and then told the world why, using the most respected voice he had, law. Her LinkedIn messages slowed. The speaking invitation for the October panel? Canceled due to format changes. A newsletter she subscribed to posted a roundup titled 10 Legal Advisors to Watch, and she wasn't even on the radar. That night, she sat alone in her high-rise apartment, a glass of wine untouched beside her, staring at the city that no longer blinked back. The legal world was small, smaller than most people realized, and Leonard had made her radioactive. She tried calling Darren again, maybe for reassurance, maybe just to hear a voice that still returned her calls. But even he didn't answer, because there's no lawsuit for being outmaneuvered, no hearing for being forgotten, just silence, just exile. Mallory pulled into the driveway of 117 Kessler Ridge just after sunset. The street was quiet, the kind of wealthy silence that used to comfort her. No kids on scooters, no barking dogs, just the hum of carefully trimmed hedges and motion-sensing garden lights warming up as her SUV approached. She half expected the garage to lift automatically. It didn't. She tapped her code into the panel. It blinked red. "Try again." Red. She frowned, got out, walked to the front door, and rang the bell. The chime echoed somewhere inside the house that, for the past 2 years, had been theirs. The open-concept living room. The custom kitchen she insisted on redesigning with quartz counters and brushed brass pulls. Every square inch curated, cataloged, and claimed. But the only response was footsteps. Not Leonard's. Security. A man in a black blazer opened the door partially, radio clipped to his shoulder. He wasn't rude, but he wasn't friendly either. "Ms. Costello." She straightened. "Mallory Dawson." She corrected instinctively, though the marriage hadn't even happened. "I'm here to collect a few things." He didn't move. "Do you have prior clearance?" She blinked. "I live here. My clothes, documents, personal effects." "Ma'am, per foundation protocols, all access to this property is restricted to authorized personnel." She narrowed her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Leonard owns this house." The man didn't flinch. Leonard transferred ownership. It's now held in full under the Dawson Foundation's preservation charter. As of last week, you're not on the access list. She tried to laugh, but it caught in her throat. "I designed this place. Half the things inside were picked by me. The wall art, the furniture. I understand, ma'am. But unless you're on the access protocol registry, I can't let you inside." Her voice dropped an octave, losing polish. "Then call Leonard. He doesn't live here anymore." That stunned her. "He what?" The man nodded once. He moved. "This is no longer a residence. It's a foundation property, designated as a cultural archive space per deed clause 7.3. Any occupancy is reserved for official events, board retreats, and historical preservation." She was staring at him now like he was speaking in riddles. "You're telling me my fiancé turned our home into a museum?" "Not exactly a museum, ma'am. A legal archive. Philanthropic use. Tax verified. And protected under state code." She reached into her bag, yanked out her phone, and pulled up the county registry website. The digital deed listing didn't show Leonard's name anymore. Just one line. Registered owner, the Dawson Foundation, charitable nonprofit entity. She dropped her arm to her side. No words. No strength. I'll call my lawyer, she whispered. The security guard gave a small nod, already backing toward the door. Please do. But just so you know, we've had 2 attorneys attempt to challenge the ownership structure this week. Both were dismissed. The door closed softly. Not slammed. Just sealed. Mallory stood there for another full minute before turning back toward her car. From the outside, the house looked untouched. Perfect. Lights glowing warmly behind the floor-length windows. The table she picked out. The rug she fought for. The fireplace mantel she designed around a single black-and-white photo of her and Leonard on the dock at the lake. It was all in there, but it wasn't hers. And the realization hit not like a car crash, but like drowning. Slow. Inevitable. Because this was supposed to be the last battlefield. The final tug-of-war. She'd lost the lake house, the vineyard stake, her reputation, her clients, her leverage. But this house, this damn house, was supposed to be the one thing they could negotiate. And it wasn't even on the board anymore. She drove in silence. The phone rang once in her lap. Her father again. She didn't answer. Because what was there left to say? Leonard hadn't fought her. He hadn't yelled, accused, threatened. He'd just waited. For her to yell first. Then he turned the key and shut the door behind him. And now even the walls knew. There was no place left for her to stand. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Mallory finally worked up the nerve to go. No lawyers. No strategy. No phone in hand ready to record. Just her, parked half a block away in a neighborhood too modest for Leonard's usual tastes. Brick houses, hand-tended gardens, those little wooden flags stuck in flower beds. Not wealth. Not power. Just peace. She stepped out of the car and walked slowly up the short stone path. There was no gate. No cameras. No security. Just a narrow porch, 2 trimmed hedges, and the faint sound of a radio playing jazz inside. She stood there longer than she should have, watching the curtain flutter through the open window. Then the door opened. Leonard stepped out, dressed simply. Henley shirt, jeans. No watch. No ring. No edge. He looked at her like someone reading the weather. Carefully, without hurry, without judgment. For a few long seconds, neither of them said a word. Then Mallory exhaled like she'd been holding the same breath since the prenup meeting. Why, she said. Her voice wasn't sharp now. No courtroom cadence, no performance. Just a woman who'd finally run out of stage. You let me scream at you, she said. In front of my father. You knew what I'd say. You knew. He nodded once. Slowly. I did. So why didn't you stop me? She asked. Why didn't you just tell me there was a trap? That Addendum D wasn't some technical footnote. Leonard leaned against the doorframe. No smirk. No gloat. Just calm. Because I hoped you wouldn't trigger it. She blinked. I hoped, he said again, that even if you were angry, you'd still trust me. Her arms dropped to her sides. Leonard, I didn't think you'd actually weaponize the law against me. I didn't. He nodded toward the sidewalk. You did. Her throat tightened. I wrote the prenup myself, he continued, voice steady. I left the trap exactly where only someone who didn't trust me would find it. And set it off. Mallory looked down. So this is it. You just leave? I already did, he said. You think this makes you noble? Her voice cracked now, reaching for anger, but falling into grief. You blew up everything. Leonard walked back inside for a moment, then returned. Not with a document. Not a legal threat. Just a small card. Heavyweight paper. Off-white. He held it out. She took it. One line, printed in old serif font. If you must scream to win, you've already lost. She stared at it. Then back at him. That's what this was about? Teaching me a lesson? No, Leonard said. I don't teach. I just leave when it's loud. A breeze rustled the hedges. The jazz inside played on. Mallory stood there, alone on the porch, the card trembling slightly in her hand. And suddenly she saw it all. Not the legal filings, the trusts, the foundation, the op-ed. But the moment in the office when he signed with that calm smile. When he didn't flinch. When he handed her control, knowing she'd break it. Because the trap hadn't been in the fine print. It had been in the mirror. Leonard turned and stepped back inside. He didn't close the door hard. Just enough. Enough for the silence to hold. Mallory looked down at the card one last time. And finally understood. The prenup hadn't destroyed her. Her certainty had.